Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Jenny Beal, and this is the Awareness Podcast. Today, I'm so pleased to be joined by Heena Vasani. Hi, Heena. To talk about her spiritual journey, the challenges she faced along the way, and how motherhood became her spiritual practice. And as usual, I'll start by telling you a little about Heena's background. So in her early 20s, Hina faced a serious health problem, was put on a waiting list for a kidney transplant. And this led her to question the meaning of life, birth, and death. On the day of her transplant, she had a profound glimpse of her true nature, which caused her to reflect on the responsibility attached to receiving a donated organ. She then embarked on a spiritual journey spanning over 25 years, exploring consciousness through A Course in Miracles and Advaita Vedanta. Meditation, body-mind disciplines, and in-depth psychology have helped her integrate these teachings into her life. Her core teachers include Chloe Goodchild, Rupert Spira, and A.H. Almas. Her late grandmother, a devout Hindu, also played a significant role in shaping her path by inviting her to explore motherhood as a spiritual practice. This brought her face to face with her own conditioning and childhood trauma, leading to transformation and a deeper connection with her true self and the oneness of life. Remarkably, after 25 years, her transplanted kidney remains healthy, which caught the attention of her consultant, leading to the suggestion that she share her story and meditation techniques with others. Hina is now training with the physician and psychotherapist, Dr. Gabor Mate, and teaching non-dual meditation and self-inquiry practices online. Her book, Fragrance of Freedom, Discovering Peace Through Mothering, is soon to be released. So, Hina, that's quite a story, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Tell me about the time when you were waiting for a kidney transplant. Were you on dialysis at that time?
Yes, that's right, Jenny. I was on peritoneal dialysis, and I was 21, and it's at that age that your life really takes off. And mine completely slowing down and making me really go internal. And I think the thing that really got me the most was understanding that someone would have to die for me to live in order to receive a donated kidney. And that completely shook my world. It made me really deeply, deeply consider life and what's its meaning and why we're here.
Yeah. And were you also at that time thinking about your own possible death?
Absolutely, because I really entered into the unknown. We weren't sure if a kidney would ever come through. And if it did come through, we weren't sure if my body would reject the kidney. And then my health and weight were deteriorating at a rapid pace. And it was almost as if I was just being called to be extremely still and almost digest very slowly this experience that was coming my way.
Yes, it's an extraordinary experience for a 21-year-old, because usually kidney patients are an awful lot older than that, aren't they? In their 40s or 50s or something like that.
Yeah.
So quite an amazing trauma, really. But they found a kidney for you.
That's
and
right.
you went into hospital, and then you had a sudden glimpse of your true nature. Can you describe that? Describe what happened.
Yes, so I was called in to the hospital very early, almost 7, 8 o'clock. I got a phone call to say that, a kidney had arrived. And I sat in the waiting room opposite my consultant, and something happened to me. And it was as if I went through layers and layers of emotional, psychological, physical layers of the mind, and I sank back into a very deep part of myself, and it was almost as if like awareness opened up, and in that moment I felt so much love. I felt held, and there was initially I felt it was all internal, but then what happened is that the solidity of the room started to lose its structure. And there was a boundlessness and a boundarylessness. And it was intense and intimate at the same time. And it was so it was a private initiation into something much deeper, and something that I couldn't, I'm only bringing myself out to speak about it after 25, 26 years. So it's taken years to really digest and integrate into my being.
Yes. So then you had the operation, and after that, did anything of that glimpse remain with you?
Not for a long while. I think the emphasis for me after the transplant was really to come back into the body, because I had lost my ability to feel. I was so shut down. I felt constricted in so many ways. And I was aware that I was carrying a very heavy karmic backpack, meaning that there was, a deep wounding inside my soul with regards to my own mother, and her leaving me at a very young age. So my emphasis was to really become grounded back in myself. So I learned to meditate, especially body sensing meditation. I studied reflexology to really understand how to balance the kidneys and to balance the body. And I seeked and found my birth mother. So it was a time of real delving deep inside myself to finally listen and ask, what is it that I need now? What is it that's going to make me whole? So and even I looked thoroughly at my diet as well, and really began to understand how living foods could also help my body. So it was almost like laying down a brand new foundation for my life.
Complete and utter change, I would imagine.
Absolutely. A brand new direction in every way.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what led you to meditation? I think you mentioned reflexology and things like that. Was that suggested by the hospital, or was that something you just thought of for yourself?
Well, very much so. I understood I had to bring my central nervous system into balance. And the best way I understood that, what I understood was that because of the disconnection that I had faced as a child, I was pretty much, my central nervous system was resting in a position called dorsal. and I had to slowly usher it into a position of ventral, which really meant meeting people who were holding that quality of presence and peace, and sitting with them and beginning to understand how one actually begins to bring that peace and bring balance back into one's life. So yeah, I spent, there was a Brahma Kumari meditation center in Northwest London. So I started to visit that, and the presence and the love that I felt there was similar, very, very similar to that which I had experienced. So I understood I was on the right path. And then the reflexology, again, you know, beautiful teacher, beautiful studio in London, where I was able to come back, really, really come back into my body.
Yes, yes. So you've mentioned childhood trauma and your mother leaving you. How did that happen, and how did that affect you?
Yes, it's quite a long story, and I have mentioned it in my book. But if I were to really bring out the jewels of that, if I could even use that word, jewels, I was being born out of wedlock, and without the umbrella of the traditional arranged marriage system in our Indian society. And my mother had left a marriage which no longer served her and had outgrown. And that was quite pioneering for an Asian woman back in the late 60s, early 70s.
Yes.
It was very troubling for her own family and her own society. And she really did become the family scapegoat. And my father was a student, and, you know, they had met whilst at a Saturday job, which they both had, and fell in love, and I was arriving, and society just went happy, and her previous marriage hadn't completely finished its divorce proceedings. So she was just attacked on every level and lost faith in herself, in God, in her divinity, in her beauty, and felt ostracized for just, falling in love and wanting to bring me into the world. So it's a time of deep, deep suffering. And what I understand now is that when we're in the womb, we actually begin to absorb, you know, these feelings from our mothers. So when we give birth, you know, it's almost as if those structures and patterns get laid down inside us. And although I couldn't talk, but I was feeling and absorbing the stress that she was in. And she, after 4 or 5 years, she just understood that she couldn't live in a community that weren't looking after her or understanding her. So she left me with my father and actually took her own spiritual path and journey, and found Christ. Yeah.
Right. Gosh. So did you have any female influence in your life at that time?
So I went to live, within 2 years, my father married, and I went to live with him and my stepmother and my newborn baby sister. But I would say that the main influence, or the guiding influence in my life, was definitely my grandmother.
Mhm.
And she was very connected in her heart. She loved the Hindu scriptures.
Mhm.
And later in life, she too held satsang in London for over 20 years, from the age of 70 to 90.
Wow.
She was the loving light that completely and utterly, what can I say, filled me, filled me every time I was with her.
Yes, yes. So how was all that trauma that you experienced as a young child, how was that affecting your adult life?
I felt deeply, deeply sad, disconnected from my heart. I felt almost as if I had been betrayed in some way, that I hadn't received the love that is so natural, that a mother so effortlessly honors her child with. And so there was it was like a hole. I was longing. It was a deep, deep longing within me to be loved. And, ancestrally, I'm from an Indian lineage, and Indian girls, we have strict conditioning rules, which they're heavy, energetically, they're heavy. And, we stay quiet and we honor our mother and our father and their decisions. And at some level, we're subservient and almost slightly repressed. And it was the shadow that I came here to really initially absorb, and then later I began to understand that actually this is the inner work. It's what I'm going to have to work through to really come back to the love, not only inside me, but to be able to open my heart and receive the love, receive the love from, later I had my son and my daughter.
Yes.
That's when I really
And
understood.
it's so important, isn't it, not to suppress all of those feelings, to really face them fully and not meditate them away, but to really face them. So were there any specific techniques or psychological approaches that you used for that?
Well, yes. So when Jamie came through, my son, what I was really met with is that he pressed every single button within me. Everything in my ego had to come out, to be looked at, and especially the abandonment, especially the feeling of lack, especially the feeling of separation. And I started to work in so many different capacities. So through Jamie, through his nursery group, came the teachings of A Course in Miracles. And I understood that for me to really understand this course and understand what my son is asking for me, I had to seek some sort of psychological understanding of myself before I could actually understand the course. So I worked with Chuck Spezzanzo through the psychology of vision. And through his work, I began to understand the core beliefs that I had taken on with regards to growing up without a mother and a father who was extremely busy at work. So I understood that I hadn't been seen, I hadn't been met. I felt alone. And it was these structures within me that had to be opened up and unpacked thoroughly. And what I really began to understand is, first of all, it was very important that I told my story, because in that way that my mind began to relax. And as my mind began to relax, I was able to go into the feeling. Now, what I didn't understand back then, but what I thoroughly understand now, is that our feelings, because they were laid down before we even learned to think and form beliefs. So feelings are pre-verbal. So I began to access my feelings, and through accessing feelings, I began to understand the beliefs that I formed by feeling unloved, feeling abandoned, feeling small. And then I began to understand the coping mechanisms that got me through my childhood, but actually weren't serving me anymore, to stay quiet, to be the good girl. And it was actually time to begin to put down boundaries, healthy boundaries for me, so that I could actually begin to show up more readily for my son and be present for him, and not be stuck in the past in this heavy, sticky, karmic patterning that wasn't allowing me to embrace him fully. So forgiveness, forgiving my own beliefs, forgiving my mother and father, and really understanding their own stories, and, you know, what they went through as children as well. And through understanding and really connecting with the heart of their own woundings, I was able to connect with my own heart and understand myself deeply. And in that way, really begin to meet with my son, Jamie, heart to heart, you know.
Yes, yes. It's, I mean, there's such an important part of the direct path teaching is that we don't choose our thoughts, and that means we don't choose our conditioning. So your parents didn't choose their conditioning either, and nor did their parents.
Yes.
And somehow it can take away, just that understanding can take away a lot of anger and accusation and all that sort of thing, can't it?
Well, absolutely. But when I started the course and when I had just had Jamie, I was adamant that I was a separate self, even though I had a glimpse of my true nature and understood that to be real. I was still dealing with not only the belief that I was a separate self, but the feeling that I was a separate self. And it wasn't until decades later when I really immersed in the non-dual path and began to feel the subtlety of my own essence and realize, actually, we're not doing any of this. But it was such a long time, Jenny, to get there, because there was so much wounding there. And I had to have so much compassion for myself. And it took so, it's almost as if it's an act of real self-love to begin to just sit with yourself and allow yourself to feel through your pain so it can begin to dissolve, and create a life where it's simple. So there is time to feel, and there's time to heal, and there's time to grow and contemplate.
Yes. And it does take courage, doesn't it, to do that, to allow those feelings to be there.
Absolutely. And the thing is, though, when you have children, and I'm sure every mother knows this and every father too, that to really, our child is asking us to show up in our truth,
Yes.
our honesty, and they can feel, they play up when we're not being honest, when we're not being truthful, when we're trying to shove something under the carpet, and they
Yes.
feel the resonance of truth. And that's how I would say that I really can connect with my children, through that quality, of essence, that quality of depth.
Yeah. So going back to Course in Miracles, that doesn't take you all the way. It didn't take you all the way, and doesn't. I think the Course actually says that it doesn't go all the way. But what were the important things that you learned from the Course as you were studying it at that time?
There was so much there in the Course, but for me, ultimately, the Course felt like a prayer. It felt like a prayer between myself and the Holy Spirit, and forgiving all the beliefs and misperceptions that I had about myself. And in that way, it relieved my mind, and I could slowly begin to sink back and really witness the innocence in my son.
Mm-hmm.
And in that way, I was able to welcome my mother back into my life too, and connect with her innocence. But
Yeah.
it was a very private, almost a sacred meeting with the Course in Miracles, because I couldn't talk about it to anyone, apart from the teachers that I was studying with, because it asks for forgiveness, but it's a very different type of forgiveness it's asking for. It's asking us to forgive this world, because this world is not true. And underneath the ego thought structure and the world that we see, there's a reality of truth. Now, through the glimpse that I went through in the waiting room at the hospital, I knew the Course to be true. And that's why, for me, it spoke so loudly, because I understood I wasn't my thoughts, I'm not my feelings, I'm not my beliefs. I'm much deeper than that.
Yes. So it taught you to forgive yourself and to forgive the world.
Forgive the world,
Yes.
and really forgive the ego thought structure, where there's so much judgment and guilt and self-attack.
Yes.
Understanding that actually there's another way at looking at the world. There's another voice within me that's much quieter and deeper, but it's the true voice, and I choose that.
And then did Advaita Vedanta come along later or after the Course in Miracles?
It did. It came almost 10 years after having been with the Course.
Mm-hmm.
And the energy of Advaita Vedanta was so much more lighter, because it was almost as if when I was studying the Course, my thoughts were heavy. I had a lot of anger. I had judgment. There was a density within me and within my thought system. So it was a real excavation of the densities, whereas Advaita was inviting me to just be aware of awareness. Now I knew and understood that because I had experienced it. And actually, the other beautiful thing about raising Jamie and then later Sienna is they were taking me into portals of presence, where I would experience my true nature. So, for example, when we sat down to do art, and we could sit for a couple of hours and just paint, and I would enter into beautiful presence, into a timeless stillness, and just be absorbed by this love. And I could feel the connection, the oneness, our shared being. And it happened through painting and through their musicianship. And when I used to go and listen to their orchestra evenings, and so it was almost as if I was shifting so much more out of the density into much more lightness. And that's when Advaita Vedanta came through.
Yes. Were you studying that in a formal way at an Advaita school or something, or were you studying it on your own?
Well, the first teacher that came through was Muji. So I did,
yes.
So I did go and visit him in his ashram. For, I think it was almost 10 days. I did a 10-day retreat.
Yes.
And came home and knowing that, yes, this is the truth. But again, my mind was still taking me out. The children were still pressing buttons, although lighter buttons, but they were still there. And it wasn't until I really started getting to Rupert Spira where I really felt the pristine clarity in his teachings. And also he was London based, which was much more easier for me, meaning I didn't have to catch the plane to Portugal.
Yes.
Yeah, it was just beautifully arrived. Beautifully arrived, yeah.
Yes. And you've mentioned lightness. Was there anything else that you learned specifically from his teaching or from Muji's teaching also?
The one thing that really began to come through in both the teachers' teachings was that awareness is always present. It isn't that it disappears and then it comes back, which is what I initially was experiencing, but it's always there. And what I loved about that was back at home with the children, I could allow myself to initially believe that was true and then sink into and really experience that for myself. So regardless, if Jamie and Sienna were pressing my buttons, it was almost, okay, sink back, go behind your thoughts, your feelings, your sensations, turning my attention inward and meeting whatever was presenting. Okay, so I'm angry. So feel that anger. What's it about? Does it have a color? Does it have a tone? And really just being compassionate with myself and allowing it to melt and dissolve back into its true nature. So I began to, because I thought, what is life really about? Why are we here? And it's about experiencing it to its fullness. And that meant experiencing everything. It means experiencing the dark, the anger, the grief, the frustration, the abandonment, and then the joy, the laughter, the love of my children. And so what really happened was I just began to, it was almost as if it's like learning to drive a new car. I began to understand that if I am awareness, if that's truly my experience, then as I rest and sit in and as that field, I can invite the shadows, to tea. I can invite them in because they'll be here for a while. And sometimes they're there for days. I can sit, still feel through remnants and echoes of that initial pang or sadness. and
Yeah.
work it through, just welcome it all. And in that way, I could just welcome myself and all the parts of me, not trying to suppress or hide anything anymore, but just saying, okay, fully open. I accept Jamie and Sienna as they are, so I can accept myself as I am. It's real exploration. It was like diving deeply into motherhood and really revering, what I was being called and asked to do in this lifetime.
Mm. And tell me more about your grandmother. She was obviously an important influence, and you said that in a way that she was the one who encouraged you to explore mothering as a spiritual practice.
Yes, so when Jamie was born and my grandmother came to the hospital, and she told me instantly that this is Krishna. And later, when Sienna was born, she told me that Lakshmi had arrived in the home.
Mm.
What she was really saying was that, can you really meet with your children's essence in this lifetime? Can you really see them and bring them up without the lack that I had endured?
Mm.
So that took me away from having to constantly get to teachers and get to teaching, because I understood what my grandma was asking is that if you just stick with honoring your children and mothering your children, then through that, the truth will be revealed. And that's what happened and is happening and is still happening and, constantly unfolding. And it hasn't been an easy journey by any means. And the last 10 years, I've actually been a single mother and mothered Jamie and Sienna by myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that meant not only was I having to remain fully grounded and fully present for them and their well-being, but it also meant I had to stay fully grounded for my well-being and for my own kidney too.
Yes.
And I just wanted to mention something that really I had to work on in this lifetime, and perhaps not many people get an opportunity like this, but it was about really welcoming my own kidney into the body, because it had come from a very young recipient who had died outside the hospital on a motorbike accident.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And it made me realize, not only the preciousness of life, but also how fragile life truly is. And as I began to meditate, I was able to link into almost the energetic field of the kidney, and understanding that the recipient, when she had passed away, had died in a lot of fear. And at that level, when the kidney came into my body, I was also resonating in that much fear. So our coming together karmically, there was a resonance there.
Mm.
And for years, I had to work on my feelings of fear. And it wasn't until, it took about 9 years, Jenny, for me to really accept this kidney as my own, and that it wasn't just a solid organ that I could feel in my body, but it was almost as if it had to open and it had to reveal its own truth, and it revealed its own pain. It revealed the stresses around the operation. So it allowed me, in a way, going deeper inside myself, I became very sensitive to life and really began to listen out for the subtleties. And it's in these subtleties and in these sensitivities that actually we can we begin to lose our sort of identity as this separated self and sink back into true nature. And that comes after years of really being with and loving through our pain and listening to our pain and holding it and then letting it go back to the energetic field of Shakti, that it was born out of.
Yes, yes. And of course, our bodies are an integral part of the world, aren't they? Francis Lucille has these beautiful meditations. Your real body is the world. And right. If you really look at it, you feel there's no separation between your body and the world. And that's just as important as the intellectual understanding, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think when we read something like that, we can really feel the beauty of it. But it isn't until we really experience that can we really taste our true nature.
Yes. So what were the challenges that you faced bringing up your children? You've mentioned they pushed your buttons. Was there anything really terrible that you found very hard to deal with?
That's a great question, because it requires so much, from a mother, and it offers so much too. The one thing I did understand, though, that I wanted to bring them up consciously, and they were in a private school setting, but I decided that for them to really stay connected to their own feelings and their own compass, they needed an education that was rich, rich in depth and rich in being. So I seeked out a conscious schooling system, and I found one in Hertfordshire, a Steiner schooling system, and putting them into that system where they began to really play, and they gardened, and they learned how to sew and knit, including Jamie, and cook, and that took so much. It took the heaviness out of me worrying about them having to keep passing exams. And understanding that this schooling was about raising a human being, and it was a schooling where they were going to become whole and live in alignment with not only their own unfolding, but live in alignment with their heart. So then I began to understand that it's not that I haven't come here to mold my children. I don't know what they've come to be. It was almost as if, let's find out who Jamie and Sienna are, let them unfold. What are their gifts in this lifetime? What have they come to share? And what is it in them that needs to be celebrated? And where are their shadows, in this lifetime that they need to look at? So this schooling system allowed us so much time. I mean, its rhythm is 2 years slower than the state schooling system or the private schooling system here in the UK. So there were so many pressures that came off me, and it was like I was finally supported, because my life had slowed down. I was meditating, I was more internal, which meant also that Jamie and Sienna's lives were more focused in nature and taking things slowly and understanding that there was depth in them and that they could touch that place.
And do they still have to take exams and things?
Yes, so finally they did have to take exams, and finally Jamie did actually head off to university, which he's now completed, and is working in London as a human rights lawyer. So they do get to where they need to get to, but it's slower, and it's come through their heart. It's not because they have to be someone, and they didn't have to show up in any way for them to be loved. They understood that they were loved. And in that way, all of them was here to be really accepted and honoured.
Yes. So do they have an interest in spirituality?
Well, Jamie recently went to Thailand and visited many temples. But to be honest, Jenny, I never told them about what was really going on inside me. As in, I never really explained or had to explain presence to them or going deeper inside. It was just naturally occurring for them in the household. And, I've been on a school run for 24 years, to school and back from school. And it got to a time when that car journey was there was just pristine silence. And I understood this is meditation for them, just the silence, so they can sink into their own being, no pressure, no need to talk about anything that they don't feel they want to talk about. So even when we were painting, those were meditative moments, eating dinner quietly, and understanding actually the whole of life was a meditation in the house. And it's not something that I could ever put into words, or it's not even something that I could even begin to explain to them, but they know their truth, they know their heart, and they're constantly able to keep checking into their feelings and following their inner compass. And then I think, what more? What more does a mother want, because then they're on their way, they're fully connected.
Yes, I mean, it's beautiful, and I think it's quite right, because you're showing them spirituality through direct transmission, not through any kind of dogma, any kind of religion, any kind of facts, ideas or philosophies. So that's really beautiful, because it allows them their freedom to explore in the way that's right for them when they feel inclined to do so.
Yes, absolutely. And they know that within them there is a silent field, and they could check into that at any moment.
Yes. It's beautiful. So you've got this book coming out, Discovering Peace Through Mothering. Do they know about that book?
Well, they've done all the artwork for the book.
All right.
And it's amazing, the front cover. Heena did a German lesson. They've actually been concentrating with Frau Steffi, but actually sank into this beautiful space. And there it was. Mum, here's the front cover. It was all scrunched up in her backpack. So I took it out and ironed it. The publishers, and they were like, don't worry, we can do something with this. But yes, they at their time in the Steiner school, it's not like what came through really for them was that they don't have to go through years and years of academia or years and years of going to university to learn how to draw. They were already artists at their young age. And as they drew, I started to put all their pictures up in the hallway, in the bedroom. The whole house was covered with their artwork. And then I walked around and I just picked the pieces that were talking to me, because they were all so beautiful. And I would stand in front of them, Jenny, and I would just be absorbed, just take me in, because at that age, it's like consciousness has just worked through them and drawn these amazing pictures and paintings. So yes, they know that their artwork's in the book, and they also understand that it's my inner journey. And there's just blessings and love from them for me to move on. They've grown up now. Jamie's working, Sienna's on her way to university. So in that way, they've left me a gift. And I want to share. I want to be able to share this message with other parents and mums.
Yes. Well, what would you say to those listening who are mothers or maybe grandmothers about how to bring up your children so that they do feel grounded in themselves?
That's a really deep question. I would just be really curious as to who is this being that's in front of you? Can you really see them? Can you go beyond your fears, your judgments? As mothers also, we carry so much guilt. Can we go beyond our guilt? Can we really meet with their innocence? And there's a simplicity in that, Jenny, as well, because the children are just being called. They're just asking to be loved. That's all this is about. And to create space, just to create quiet space where you can just connect at a deeper level, because there's so much doership in mothering. And this is just about being with your child, whether it's in the car, whether it's just putting them to bed after a book and having that quiet moment, or even after dinner, having a couple of quiet moments and sinking in and just beyond that to-do list. And we really just meet with their essence.
And freedom is important, allowing them their freedom to be themselves, isn't it? Yeah. But there's still a need for boundaries. So how do you balance the two?
Yes, absolutely. The boundaries are so important. And it's when we really begin to honor ourselves and begin to honor our boundaries and really understand who we are, what pushes our buttons, understand our own shadow. It means that we can really meet with our children and meet with all parts of them, to understand, okay, so they're upset. What do they need? They need space. Okay, no, that actually needs a boundary. So let's put that in. Perhaps we need to share something here, look at something deeper. And there's so much joy also that they come to share, Jenny. And when that moment arrives, really celebrate. We come to experience this joy, this freedom, this love. And if we miss that, then we're missing such a huge part of what they're calling us to be, to be this joy, be this love. and embrace it all.
Mhm. So now that they've both left home,
Mhm.
do you still do any kind of spiritual practice yourself?
You know, Jenny, it's an ongoing practice.
Mm-hmm.
Every day there's an unfolding, and when we think we've come to the end of something, it just means that there's another doorway that's opening. There's more depth, there's more subtlety, there's more sweetness. And, you know, if something comes up for me that I have to look at, then I'll sit with myself, become aware, become mindful, and welcome whatever's come through, and really understand, where has this come from? You know, it's usually something deep, deep, still coming through from my childhood, from my wounding. Sit with it and welcome it, and really let it dissolve. And other times there could be a belief attached to it, or I'm still not being completely true to myself, and understanding and loving myself in that space, and understanding that there's a message in all our feelings. They're like messengers, aren't they?
Yes.
Just to stay true to whatever's arising in the moment. And that's my practice now. It's not like I sit on a meditation cushion, because my life is meditation. I created
Yes.
I created so much space, and I've created simplicity, so that I can hear, so that I can feel, so that I can sense and taste everything that's coming into my experience. And then that makes my life richer, Jenny. Like, I don't have to be filled with so much of the material longing that I was filled with even 10, 20 years ago. It's like, no, the richness is here, and I feel fulfilled because I know I'm loved, and I know that I am loved.
Yes.
And that's enough.
Yes. So going back to your kidney transplant,
Yeah.
obviously it is unusual for it to be still fully functioning
Right.
beyond 20 years, I think is
Yes.
what they say is the maximum normally. So how do you feel that your practice of meditation and the healing of your childhood trauma and all the understanding that you've developed in the meantime, how has that helped with what's really quite a physical thing, isn't it? Because what happens is it sort of begins to fail normally and get rejection ultimately.
Yes.
So how is it, how do you see that link?
Well, I think it's so important that we include the body on this spiritual journey. It's not something that can be easily transcended, and it has to be met fully. And it was through meeting my own body, you know, and meeting the limitations within the body, that I was really able to open. It was a portal. My body was a portal into presence, Jenny, because through the pain was I able to reach the subtle realms and come back to true nature.
Yes. So the title of this podcast series is Living in Not Knowing.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
Yes. Well, it means to live as consciousness, Jenny,
Mm-hmm.
to allow consciousness to work through me. Because so much of the Hina has fallen away, and now really allowing to flow with the flowing, of life.
Yes.
And I have no idea where this work will land. I have no idea really where I'm going to be placed physically. I'm in the Cotswolds at the moment, but as Sienna leaves for university, it means there's much more freedom, and I will live with an open heart and share. There's a generosity that comes through as we go through this opening and teaching, this deep, deep teaching. Our heart opens, and something within us wants to share and give back in whatever capacity. So let's see. Let's see what unfolds.
Yes, it's about embracing uncertainty about life, because there may come a time when your kidney does stop working. Would you want another transplant if it was available?
It really depends. It depends whether am I fit enough, am I healthy enough to have another transplant, because when a kidney does fail, then you really do lose a lot of body strength. And so will I be able to go through such another major surgery? I don't know. And I'm also of the understanding that karmically it's written, our destiny and our path. And I feel that I've received so much already in this lifetime. And if it's time for my life to come to an end, then that's also absolutely fine.
Yes.
One step at a time. Yeah.
So what's important for you now about life and about living? Is there more to explore and learn or discover? Are there things you're excited about doing? Or
yes. Well, my grandmother told me to never ever stop learning. I don't think I ever could, because there's transmission when you sit with the teacher and really begin to receive, a new way of looking at life. And at the moment, I'm working with Dr. Gabor Mate, and he's offering a jewel to humanity, and being able to sit and listen to his teachings, knowing that there's something in there for me also to share with others.
Yes.
So let's see.
I think that's a lovely place to end. And thank you, Hina, so much. Your story is such an inspiring one, and it's so lovely to be able to share it online.
And thank you, Jenny, and thank you for inviting me onto the podcast. Such a blessing.
And thank you all for listening.
Thank you.